Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for waiting for this time, and I'll let every one of you get 30, 45 minutes live back, and you can go somewhere else, so we can, because we're delayed like 30, 40 minutes. Okay, so it's a cool bike. Hi, everyone. My name is Marcin. I'm a CEO and founder at Toolbox for HR. I spent 17 years recruiting software developers, pretty much all around Europe. I was recruitment lead at Hewlett-Packard. I was recruitment manager at Microsoft. I spent 8 years managing half of Google's engineering recruitment. And 2 years ago, I opened up my own shop. It's Toolbox for HR. In short, we're the best developers among recruiters and the best recruiters among developers. And yeah, we grew from 2 to 23 people within the last 1.5 years. Last year, we recruited 120 software developers. And this year, between January and today, we also hired 120. Probably we're going to hire 350 developers by the end of the year in 2016. So guys, there are approximately 1 million developers all around Europe. We have different distribution, of course, between the countries. You wouldn't expect as many in Macedonia or Latvia, for example. At the same time, what you have to remember is that 80 of those developers will change jobs over the next 1 hour. That's around 15% of all the software engineering pool that you have in Europe. Well, when you look at Poland, 7 software developers an hour are changing jobs. And that's basically it. Generally, Poland has some technology talent. There are approximately 85,000 developers. Of course, Warsaw is the biggest chunk of this group. Of course, not all of the developers are the same. There are low-level C programmers, there are Java developers, but that's pretty much the entire pool that we have within the country. Warsaw, with its 21,000 developers, equals pretty much to Berlin, as well as Munich when it comes to volumes. There are differences in the tech stack of those developers, but Stockholm, Warsaw, Munich, and Berlin are pretty much the same size when it comes to the talent pool. London is obviously the biggest tech talent hub in Europe. But when you take into consideration that we have around 100,000 developers in London, that's still nothing, comparing to the Bay Area as well as New York City. So this is where most of the technology talent in the world is. So Poland doesn't compare to either of those cities, entire Poland, not Warsaw. Every company has their own recruitment strategy. Some are sending cupcakes to developers at the company that they are competing with for talent. Some spend the entire day on LinkedIn. Some recruiters put out posters. And honestly, there are no bad strategies as long as they are, of course, working. How do you know that your strategy is working? So there are 2 factors. Factor number 1 is butts in the seats. So how many people you were able to acquire, how many people you brought in. And that's very easy to measure. Your team was 15 developers, now it's 25, you hire 10, great. But there is also a factor of the effort you have to put into bringing developers into your teams. And this is something that we occasionally see people are not necessarily doing. So it happens to me that I speak to the CTOs who sit down with me and with a calculator and they start tracking what are the pass-through rates from one stage to another. And turns out that they are spending 40 hours to just interview time to hire 1 developer. And when they have aggressive plans of growing from 20 to 60 to 80 developers, that means they're going to be spending almost 2,500 hours just doing the interviews. This is a time where developers are not contributing to the code base. This is where QA guys are not writing tests. This is the time where DevOps are not really investing in scaling infrastructure, this is a time that is just gone. Just to show you in the hard cash, this is how much it means. In the hard cash that is being spent on growing a team from 20 to 80 without really measuring the efficiency of your recruitment process. So as I said, there are no bad strategies as long as they're working, as long as you're flexible about hiring developers, as long as you keep on tracking how much time you're spending on it. So don't rest on laurels, just keep on verifying the numbers that you have coming from your recruitment. Replacing people costs money. So I'm trying to use some reasonable numbers to show you guys today, but I found 7 different researches on how much does it cost to replace one person. There are different sources, but surely we know that replacing people costs money. And this is a cost that is also a hard cash when you look into your business long run. So you can easily assume that people who are working for you will be looking into new jobs. I personally believe that first employees should be hired for equity, not really for money, because when you're starting, you are spending your friends, family, and other fools' money. But at some point, you have to realize that you have to arrive to the real market conditions, and you really have to make sure that you're paying the right money, because as you can see, 78% of developers might consider looking into another job, and some of them will be actually looking for money. There is a limited number of people who can give 0.5% of your pre-revenue company. So I strongly recommend to actually check what the market conditions are when you're trying to hire 16th developer. Yeah, let's talk about the 16th developer on your team. Those people have to get home one day. I know for founders it's a hard to accept fact that people do have other lives than the business, because they went through life and death moments in the history of their company already. Culture is something that keeps on evolving. So when you're 4 guys from one dormitory, you know each other for 10 years. Of course, the culture is very much driven by your relations, but the sooner you hire someone who is not necessarily copy-paste mini version of yourselves, the better for you. And apparently, it's better for anyone who might want to join your company, because they really want to have better work culture. They want to have a better corporate culture within the company. And of course, colleagues. The moment you're gonna introduce great, diverse, and cool team, this will also work as a magnet for anyone who you might want to hire. Careers at startups usually happen by themselves, and people won't have a time to be bored. They will be developing their skills, their expertise. They will be learning new things at extremely fast pace. I know it for myself. I know it from the cases of my clients. People keep on learning, and this is something that you can definitely ensure in any startup that is growing at high pace. At some moment, it slows down. People come to you and tell you, okay, it's not like it used to be. Well, it's because they have some spare time on their hands and they're not learning. And developers want to build new things, they want to learn new things. And I see occasionally founders trying to prevent it manually, the burnout. They're moving people between the projects, between the teams. But you also have to remember that people who are very early in their career, they don't know how to really ask for new learning opportunities. And yeah, in this case, you have to really be building infrastructure that will allow people to grow, to learn new things, to keep on challenging themselves. There are many ways of learning: classroom, reading books, doing and breaking stuff, whatever works for you. Yeah, people and all developers just want to be better in their job. They want to be building new stuff. They're curious, hence breaking things, and they don't want to stay behind. So I hope whatever you're going to be expanding your team, whenever you're going to be growing development team, you will keep in mind that there are 3 pillars of everybody's career within a company. And yeah, good luck with that. So now I'd like to invite to the stage 2 of my great panelists. So, quick introduction. Patrycja, this lady here in the middle. Patrycja is a HR manager, head of HR at Brainly. I met Patrycja 2 years ago when she actually was starting her career with Brainly. I visited her a couple of months ago in Kraków. And, but don't believe the job title. I think Patrycja is a kind of like chief everything officer at Brainly Kraków. And my very good friend, Brendan Cohen. Brendan joined Brendan after a couple of recruitment jobs he had in US, joined Google in New York, where there were 11 software developers there, and built this site to extensive numbers. I think there are several thousand developers working there now. Then Brendan was my boss in Europe, where he was managing Google's engineering recruitment all across the region. And right now, Brendan is VP of people at Schibsted. Schibsted is a 180-year-old company that basically was printing papers. And basically that was their business for such a long time. Right now, Brendan is helping Schibsted to transform into a digital age company. Actually, he built up a new startup from 0 to 200 people within Schibsted group last year. So yes, great to have you guys here.
Check.
Okay, guys, so I want to focus on those three different pillars in your day-to-day job. And I was hoping you can share with me and the audience, how do you guys normally use numbers when you're working in recruitment? Patrycja?
Yeah.
Go ahead, ladies first.
So in Brainly, we have kind of different situation that you described in a sheet. And I'm kind of glad that we did it because we are mostly searching for quality, not quantity of the developers. And the team is still very small in terms of how many developers we have. We have below 20, it's 17 developers at the moment. We are not aiming for like huge scale, so we are much more concentrating on both skills, of course, because we want to build the best product, but mostly we are also focused on the culture and how the person fits the culture, but how the person will also follow the performance. And of course, those numbers that you showed, the numbers regarding how many people want to grow in the company, how many people want to be satisfied with curiosity. This is important for us, and we try to satisfy it, so we search for people who are really very fit into what we need. In terms of numbers, we are mostly looking for one particular number at the last stage of our recruitment process. It's how many offers are rejected by us, but also how many offers are rejected by our candidates. And those rates are very high for us because we have something that we developed in Brainly. The last stage of our recruitment process is what we call the demo day. So it's a part of the recruitment process where we invite the candidate, every candidate, no matter the position, and we are evaluating the candidate, but at the same time we are trying to show the candidate, the whole environment and the whole culture, and we are trying to pass the whole responsibility on the decision to the candidate So we are, of course, making the choice, but of course the candidate is also making the choice, and is able to see what the person will be dealing with. So in terms of those three, things: hire, then retain people, and then grow them. So this is actually the beginning of this, the second stage. So, when you are focusing on hiring, but at the same time, you are making sure that the person will stay within the organization for longer. And this is the most important part that we are, focusing on.
I'll start with a little bit broader interpretation, just starting from the people operation side, and then maybe zero down on the recruiting side in particular. But in general, I think when we're looking to set the stage, we're trying to be a very forward-thinking business. We're trying to be more of an engineering type of culture, and to be able to start that from the beginning is pretty key. Because I think engineers and the business in general, the currency that they use to communicate is data and information. And so we as a people operations organization want to use that currency. So it's less about the touchy-feely we think things and more about how do we actually measure things and show the business value in each type of interaction we have. That's true for hiring, but it's also true for onboarding. It's also true for exiting. It's also true for growing. And so we're able to actually have these measurements in place to be able to say, hey, what was the change in your behavior or your thought process or whatever in terms of it. Now, specifically about recruiting, there's a couple of different things that we're thinking from the beginning. One is to be able to get the critical mass and to be able to predict eventually, hey, how many CVs are we going to need to look at to get X many hires? And that takes a little bit of time to do, but it's very, very powerful because then you can actually also resource effectively. You can also troubleshoot different areas. Is this a pipeline issue, or is this a calibration or interviewing issue? Where can things break down, and how can you make more efficiencies? Which actually provides a lot of value, especially when it comes to time and shipping product.
Do you think tests can automate the selection of the candidates?
Tests? I think there's different views about how to look at that. And I think it really kind of matters about what your main goal is. I think for most startups, it's actually kind of a big deal about being able to meet that person. And I think especially early stage, if you are a high-end developer, you have a lot of options. That personal touch makes a whole bunch of sense as opposed to just throwing a test that way. What I found tests to really work well on is for mass candidates or talent pools that look pretty much the same, and how can you differentiate those? So it could be new grads from China, for instance. It's very difficult to figure out who is the best or the top 1% of that talent pool, just to give an extreme example, and that can allow you to have different data points to actually see the spikes.
I would say that you have to look at it from the perspective of the efficiency of the process within the organization, but you also have to look at the candidate experience, and you have to imagine that if the candidate is not searching for the position, over 60% of candidates, are not actively searching for a position, giving them tests just to, check at the beginning if they're having, the right level of expertise that we want may discourage them, from just actually getting into the process and getting to the company. So I would say you have to somehow balance it, more of the work that we are doing, and I kind of believe it, that, this is what the HR within the organization is for, is nowadays you have to sell the position. You have to do a lot of PR marketing around your company, what the person will be doing, what will be the challenge, what the product's all about, in order to, enhance people and get them into the organization. Then you have to somehow balance, how to check whether this is the right person. And I think this is the really tricky part nowadays.
That's true. You both have an experience with building teams, not only in the location where you're based. So, Brandon, we worked together on dozens of different locations. Patrycja is right now building capabilities of Brainly in New York. How do you actually recruit someone when you're based out of Krakow and you're trying to bring a chief product officer into your office in New York? That's pretty distance. It's not only distance, but it's also 6 hours difference. How does it work for you?
If we start from the recruitment process, this is testing. So the whole recruitment process, it lasts long, and you have to get used to it. If you think that you're going to close the recruitment process within 4 weeks, no can do. No, it's not going to happen. You have to get used to the fact that, first of all, you need to benchmark the candidates, in order to see what are your expectations because I can also say this, and I think that if there's a lot of entrepreneurs on the audience, I guess you notice it as well. Before you actually find somebody that fits to the organization, to the product, to the stage of the company, you have to, look and see what's out there in order to define what you actually need within your organization. So this is, I think that on the level of the C position, VP position, or even heads of position, this is the most important part, and it also takes time. In order then, when you bring somebody to the organization, this building the trust at the beginning, especially when you have someone, like a leader in different location and the team, in other location, to build this trust, to build this cooperation, to build this kind of mental, connection between the team and the leader. And the HR can, of course, facilitate the whole process, but, in order to do this, the leader must be very strong, so yeah, this is a trick, I guess.
Brandon probably can write a book because right now his team is distributed in Barcelona, London, and Stockholm, while he's based out of Zurich. Previously, Brandon's organization was distributed among 12, 15 locations.
There's an added element of complexity for sure. And I should also mention there is Tech Polska in Krakow as well for Schibsted too. I want to give a little shout out for that too. I've seen it work a couple of different ways, and I think it really also depends on you as a founder and you as a company and what you want to do and what type of culture and what you want to bring to the table. So it's really up to you to do what feels good and natural to you. I've seen certain founders and developer and leaders who are very adamant about having everyone within almost walking distance of him or her, and that kind of close-knit unit and that type of thing is very, very important. And they don't want to settle for that no matter what. It becomes harder to do that as we live and operate in a more global world and global markets, et cetera. And so the reality is the more successful you are, the harder it really is to do that. If you are successful, you are most likely going to work in some type of distributed manner, et cetera. And it is kind of hard, I would say. So there's a couple of different strategies to do that. I think one of the kind of key ones is to be able to do the trust thing. I think when Marcin started, he spent time for a couple months, actually, in a larger office, really getting to know the people, for them to getting to know him, to really establish this rapport, which made it a lot easier to do the video conference and the Skyping and the Hangouts when you're in further distance away. Because the technology is here now that you can actually work remotely or anywhere you want in the world. It's very possible, but it still doesn't change the ability of that face-to-face conversation X amount of time, and especially at the beginning. So my recommendation is to actually have whatever distributed leader or office you have, especially if you're under 100 people, to be in the main group for a month to 3 months before going back. And then you can really kind of have that rapport, which is key.
And if you had a chance to see Tasso's presentation here today, that's a living proof that this face-to-face time is pretty important when working together, even remotely. Okay, so guys, about retaining people, about making people stay with you. You have two different perspectives. Patrycja works with the founders. Brandon works with senior executives. And what's what's part of the responsibility for keeping people within the company? What part of this responsibility is with you guys on a daily basis, and how much you encourage and work with your executives and founders to actually make sure that they do the right thing to keep people within the business? Brendan, this time?
Yeah, I think, I mean, hopefully you can find yourself a good business partner when it comes to the people things. I think that's actually, if you can find that pretty early on, that can help you and challenge you in a very good way, I think, and help you anticipate what's happening before it happens. That's your kind of ideal situation to be in. Because I think what the trap that we can fall in is that, hey, we're going balls to the wall, we're going very, very fast, it's great. Then as you start to grow and scale, you're doing well, but you're growing, things are changing, and you have to also do these like little housekeeping things that you didn't have to do before. Because I think what you want to do is also make sure that you have the rapport with your people, to make sure that you have that kind of right of first heads up before they decide to leave or do something else. Because I feel like for me, even as a leader, the last thing I want to ever do is to be surprised when someone says, hey, I'm going to do something else. And I feel like if I'm not doing that, then there's some things that I should be doing better. Now, when everyone's working in the same office or room, it's a lot easier to not have to have one-on-ones, to do some of this other more formal stuff, to give someone actually a performance talk, which is not very much fun to do, but actually goes a long way for your employees to actually hear and sit down for 30 minutes to talk about it and to have that conversation. And if you haven't done it in the last 6 months, go ahead and do it. It's one of those little things that will make a really, really big difference. I'm not saying to over-engineer things. I'm not saying that you have to have a huge system put in place right now, but eventually you are going to be wanting to have a rhythm, I think, of a learning culture and of a feedback culture. And at some point, you're going to be able to get in a situation where not everyone knows each other quite as well, especially if you're working remotely or in different positions as well, or different locations.
How do you work with the founders?
So I could talk about this topic like hours, but I don't have this much time. I have some kind of, request for all the entrepreneurs that are thinking about, own companies. Hire HR person as soon as possible. So don't think about this, just even when you start to think about scaling and recruiting heavily. This is too late for hiring the HR person. You have to be able to have a person that's one generalist, so is really capable of doing most things, like the T-shaped people, like most of the things in the area of the people, management. And you need this kind of person. And I agree with Brendan. So you need this kind of person to challenge this, to provide you the framework. So you can have some kind of intuitive style, how to work around people, what to do. But you have to also have some kind of a person who would be either your mirror, either your coach, either your buddy, either some kind of person to cry on your shoulder when things don't go well. Somebody who you can trust and get advice from in terms of people. And I would say that HR is, the relation between the founders and HR, and I would say management, is that the HR provides the framework to culture, to decision-making process, to, internal information, how the flow goes, to performance management, to recruitment, to development in the organization. But most of the time, the HR spends on management, on leadership, on coaching, on to showing how to execute on those frameworks. So I would say the relationship is very easy. Framework, HR, execution, leaders.
From what I'm seeing also, the experience is that when the founders do hire their first HR person, they think that all their people problems are gone. And this is when it actually starts, hard work that starts for them, where they have to really be investing a lot of their time into
That's true. I think actually that's a good point. The other, actually one thing I would maybe add to that too is a lot of actually two things. One is sometimes when you realize you can put that off for a long time, and once you kind of realize you need an HR person, you're kind of behind the times.
Yeah.
The ideal actually situation is not to be reactive, I think, and be proactive so you can find that right person. The second part is that it actually does, when you start reverse engineering how long it takes to either recruit someone, especially on the software engineering side, and actually when they're writing code and being able to ship something, you start doing the reverse engineer in terms of the math, in terms of, okay, they're actually shipping code, and then how long does it take to actually hire them and get them started, and then get them ramped up and all that stuff, and then how long does it take for their notice period, and then get a job, and then how long does it take for them to go to the interview process, and how long does it take to get their resume or their LinkedIn profile or get them interested, and actually do you need someone to reach out to them because they're already having a job and they're not looking for it. So it kind of goes like 9 or 12 months actually before you actually might have to hire that person that will go and hire you the person that was going to write your code to ship your product. So just something to think about as well.
Okay. Learning curve. So we saw the numbers from Stack Overflow survey, and software developers want to learn new stuff because they're curious, many other reasons. And how do you actually, well, let me turn it around a little bit. What are some great ideas that you might had in the past about like keeping people motivated, keeping people on this learning curve that basically failed? Some major screw-ups that you guys had in your career trying to support this learning curve.
Just let them fail. And I think this is the most important part, but this is not very easy, especially in Polish culture when you would rather, protect everyone from making the failure because you've already been there, you saw how does it go, and you want to stick your nose into it and say, no, don't do it, let's do this. So I would say that, people need to feel that they are responsible for what they are doing and that they will not be punished for the failure. So give them autonomy. So this is one thing I would say. And the second thing is it really influences the cooperation. That's why the hiring full culture is so important and hiring full values is so important because you need to sustain collaboration within the organization. I know that the teamwork is some kind of a slogan, but I think that we all know it from our own experience that, actually working with someone, even if there is a fuck up, but you know that this person will be there for you if you don't do anything, like when you do something stupid. And the person will, share the responsibility for this failure. It's much more easier to, cope with this and, draw consequences and next time do it differently.
You see?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've learned a lot of the times the hard way is just to be ruthless when it comes to talent and ruthless when it comes to hiring. There's a lot of pressure a lot of times to grow revenue, to grow headcount, to get that body in, and to get that butt in a seat. But whenever I've really kind of seen that happen, and whenever I've done that, which although I don't think I have done it very often, but everyone does, and each one of those times it's kind of bit me. So I think that's one of the things that I've really tried to learn and be better at over time for my team and for the teams that I'm supporting is a big one. And then I think also it's really also hiring generalists as much as possible as opposed to specialists. So in a fast-moving type of environment, if you just hire one person for one skill set, for one problem that you have right now, and once you solve that problem or get past that hurdle, what else does that person do? So I'd be very wary about hiring specialists unless you really need that particular skill, and that's it. But I think if you can kind of hire the right types of people, you can kind of give them that opportunity, hopefully, to grow with your organization as you do.
So that's a nice segue to the next question that I have for you guys. So we talk about hiring, retaining, and growing the talent. But people do have better and worse days. How do you deal with underperformers? Because this is something that founders usually find frustrating. They don't really know how to deal with someone who's underperforming. Sometimes they never really fired anyone before.
So I would be ruthless this time. I would say fire them. So there's a very simple rule in HR. Hire slowly, fire quickly. So if you see that there's some kind of underperforming guy and you've given the guy feedback once, twice, and you don't see improvement, don't spoil the rest of your team. Just, I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. Even though I've done it several times, or more than even several, every time it's more difficult. But there's some kind of, and my actually CEO says this, if you feel after doing it some kind of relief, it was the right decision. So you have to become kind of empathetic before making the decision, whether you're gonna feel this way.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting here. It basically reminds me of a very good friend of ours, Brendan and myself, who used to work with Elon Musk. So Elon Musk, in such a cases, used to say, when in doubt, there is no doubt.
Yeah, I very much agree with Patrycia's view on this as well. I mean, I do like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I do think it is fair and the right thing to do to give someone some feedback, to write it down over email, to give them a chance to do that and make that course correction. Because if you don't know, if you don't get that feedback, then I think what's the right thing to do there. But if it doesn't happen, yeah, I think you have to go and you have to pull the trigger. And a lot of times, not only would you feel better, but a lot of times they're going to feel better. Because my point is too, I want people to be successful, and that's and happy and do well. And if that's in our organization, great, and that's where I hope it is. But if they can be successful other places, then I want to help them get there. And sometimes it's pride, sometimes it's other stuff. But we know when it's not working, and it's better just to do it.
All right, thank you very much, guys. I'm not sure how much time we have. We're over time already, but I guess we'll find some space for Q&As. No questions, great, let's go. Seriously, no questions?
I think there was a hand in the back.
Hand in the back? That must have been someone from my team.
It's a scratch.
Yeah.
It's an itch.
Yeah.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Okay, guys, we're going to be here for the next, 15, 20 minutes. So if you're too shy to ask a question from the audience, you can find us somewhere. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Patrycja.
Thank you, Marcin.
Thank you.
Thanks.